So hello everyone. Welcome to Armor Talk. I'm Fiora, and we have with us Freddie,
Yeah, hello.
Headshot,
Hello.
I Talking,
Hello.
and the lovely and talented Spitfire.
Yes.
In addition to all of this, you may notice another name in here, Red Fox OE. This is Rich Taylor, head project manager for Armored Warfare. He is literally the boss of the entire project. Hello, Rich.
Hello, Fiora.
And we are going to be asking him a lot of questions, some of them even submitted by you guys, in order to find out the direction that Armored Warfare is going. So, you know what? I'll pass the forum over. Spitfire, you get the first question.
Oh god. All right.
On.
So something that some players don't really know about is the role of TDs or tank destroyers in the game. I mean, obviously they're supposed to be tank destroyers, but most of the time it seems like they're more matched up to take out AFVs and light tanks rather than main battle tanks. What is their role supposed to be in the game? Are they supposed to be a hard counter to something or a soft counter? Or
Yeah, that's a great question about the tank destroyer role. Kind of going back to our original implementation of all the classes. That certain classes had a hard analogous counterpart in the real world, right? Like the MBT is pretty obvious. Light tanks, generally those match to real world classifications, and same with the SPGs. But the AFVs and tank destroyer classes were two categories that we sort of made up to represent everything else that's not an MBT, SPG, or a light tank. So that's why you kind of see such a wide diversity of vehicles in those two classes. And certainly the idea of the tank destroyers was that those were the heavier gunned vehicles that fell into that category, while the AFVs were generally lighter gunned. Going forward, there is sort of a philosophical shift on that. It is a question as to whether we're still even going to call them tank destroyers necessarily with the Balance 2.0 version of the classes. We're currently looking at actually the ATGM launched vehicles as being the more likely to be classified as tank destroyer. I mean, when we say the term tank destroyer, it needs to be a vehicle that tanks are scared of. And with the new balance direction that things are going, those ATGMs really are turning into sort of the main threat of MBTs on the battlefield. So there's likely going to be a reclassification of the vehicles in general in terms of, when we say vehicles of tank destroyer, it's more likely that the ATGM platforms will become the tank destroyer class in Balance 2.0. The current vehicles that are tank destroyers, we're taking a look at them. They still are going to be generally high DPM vehicles, but they tend to suffer from a lower caliber weapon in a lot of tiers than the equivalent tier main battle tanks. So they kind of rely on their high reload time, but they may not have the necessary pen to be as equal threat to the vehicles as the ATGM launched vehicles are going to be. So they're going to be mobile support, flankers, long range snipers, and things like that still. But they may not necessarily be classified as tank destroyers when the final balance changes come to the upcoming classes.
All right. So my first question is, are there things about global operations that you have not revealed to us as of yet, and can you actually tell us anything other than what we've seen so far?
That's a good question. The reveal that we did a couple weeks ago went into pretty good detail about what we are anticipating for the .18 live version of Global Operations. I think we kind of covered everything at that point as the feature currently stands. In the future, one of the areas that will probably see the most innovation in upcoming Global Operations maps for future patches would be the wildcards themselves. For Desert Crossing, we have the 3 wildcards we have right now. We may use those same 3 for the second Global Operations map just because we want to get a second map in there as quickly as possible. But looking past the second Global Ops map, we are experimenting with some different ideas for other wildcard ideas, including calling in off-map artillery, maybe in the form of MLRS for maybe sustained zone denial. There's a few other things we're experimenting around with. some different aircraft besides just the bomb. Right now we have the bombing run. We could see something more of a gun-based strafing run from an aircraft and things like that. Radar jamming, also another one that we're exploring. At this point, they're all experimental. I can't say that any one of those will necessarily make it into the game. Even during developing this first map, we did experiment with some different things. Kind of go, that's not really panning out, and end up making cuts to some different designs. So it's always possible that might happen with those ones as well. But we are experimenting with different wildcards. Different maps will also see different number of objectives per phase. With Desert Crossing, we have the 3 objectives, then the 2, and then it goes to the 4. That's what works for the Desert Crossing map. We'll tune them differently for the different maps as we figure out what works best for the different layouts that we're experimenting with. So I would anticipate those changing. Also, different weather events for the different maps. So we have the sandstorm that can come up occasionally in the Desert Crossing map. We're experimenting with some other weather events that could have some gameplay implications for the future maps as well. So it is a mode where we want to keep innovating on. We do want to deliver more maps of this gameplay type as soon as possible, because we think it's pretty fun. We want to get some more variety in there, but we also feel that it gives us a lot of opportunities to innovate and experiment with some new mechanics as we develop new maps for it. But yeah, I think for right now, we were pretty thorough in revealing everything that was part of the .18 version of Desert Crossing.
Rich, Light is Freddy here. One question. The word rebalancing we have heard quite a lot, and a lot of people are a little bit nervous about it because they think rebalancing, what are they going to do with my tanks? Can you maybe explain a little bit more in detail what, give an example of what the rebalancing is going to be like?
Yeah, you mean in terms of the vehicles themselves?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So, a few things that we're doing with this. You could see examples of kind of some of the initial momentum with the .17 changes that we did with the anti-tank guided missiles, and also giving more smoke charges out. We really wanted to integrate those mechanics more into the game, more into the fundamental core balance. And so making them more available, more accessible, more usable was a step in that direction. Obviously, there's still some tuning and adjustments to be done from there, but we wanted to go ahead and give players an early look that, yes, things are definitely changing, sometimes in drastic ways, as early as .17, because we knew we had to spend some amount of time working on these changes for the full balance 2.0. Couple example of changes, as I mentioned, smoke, we wanted that to become more integral. One of the reasons smoke needs to become more integral is because as we sit down and start adjusting armor to better reflect real-world values based upon whatever information we have available, armor is going to be a little bit less invincible on those high-tier MBTs than it has been in the past, and that's going to be kind of an adjustment across the board. The counterbalance to that, though, is of course now MBTs also have access to more smoke charges as well. And that is going to have to be a tool that players come to learn to use, because you're not going to be able to just pull over a hill and park there and just kind of laugh as shells bounce off you all day. As you come under fire and some damage starts coming through, you'll want to pop that smoke, relocate, use hard cover a lot more. We're making a lot of adjustments to the map to the maps to allow more hold down positions and things like that. So yeah, armor is another big change. We are making a lot of adjustments across the board to both armor and the penetration in tiers. Definitely moving away from kind of the pixel hunting tiny weak spot approach of the high tier MBTs that are currently in the game. Weak points will be larger. However, we're also changing some of the core hit resolution mechanics, including how normalization works and ricochet, to allow armor angling to actually be more relevant. Right now, things like normalization and to a degree overmatch, although not really so much in the case of the MBTs, sort of negated the skill behind side scraping and reverse angling rather, and things like that. That'll come more into gameplay with the way shots will bounce with those bad angles more in balance 2.0. And again, a lot of these changes are really driven by the real world mechanics of these modern shells. Normalization as we originally represented it, was too aggressive. Modern shells really don't normalize to the kind of degree that we had them represented in the game. And since it wasn't really producing healthy gameplay as well, that was a really good reason to get rid of it. So across the board, we kind of drill down to what are the real-world mechanics here that we're trying to simulate, what's the real-world properties of these vehicles, and then how do we extrapolate from that to make a fun core gameplay experience. ATGMs will be more viable. We may take a look at how fast you can be moving and shooting them. We kind of just took the restraints off altogether in .17. I can't say that's definitely the way that it'll stay for Balance 2.0, but certainly more flexibility with being able to use those ATGMs without necessarily having to come to a stop and sit there for an X amount of seconds and then taking your shot. Because we really want those viable tank threats to be on the battlefield. Accuracy on the move, we're really looking at that. Right now, light tanks are getting dialed in to be more viable at shooting on the move with higher accuracy. That seems to be something that we want to keep in place for them. Obviously, always at the trade-off of that invincible armor. Autocannons, they're the one thing that's kind of taken a big hit. The burst fire potential of autocannons right now is really resulting in a really fast time to kill, a lot faster than we actually want. So autocannons across the board are kind of going to see a dial back. In exchange, all those vehicles that are autocannon only in current balance will be getting hooked up with ATGMs wherever possible. There's a few outliers that don't have an ATGM. I think the LAV 150 is one of the only ones. But it's a tier 2, so at that tier, you can actually still have a viable autocannon only vehicle. But past tier 2, those autocannons are going to be, they're still viable against light armor targets, which they should be, but they're not going to do anything to armor. We had to do a lot of fudging in the balance over the months to make autocannons viable. Ultimately, just did not actually create a very good gameplay experience all around, so that's going to be getting changed. The one other big change is hit point scaling and damage scaling. Hit points are not going to scale very much over the tiers in Balance 2.0. Part of the motivation of this is to make it easier or more viable to fight across tiers. The hit point scaling we have right now really makes it hard when you're fighting up tier. It makes it really easy when you're fighting down tier just because of the damage and hit point scaling going on. That's largely going away. Tier 1s will be roughly in the same ballpark as Tier 10s in terms of the number of hit points, based upon the tonnage and size of the vehicle. Instead, damage will scale with the caliber of the weapons on the vehicle. So pretty much all 90 caliber weapons will do about the same damage per shot. All 125 millimeter cannon weapons will do about the same damage per shot. There'll be some variable in there based upon shell types and some of the real world properties of the shells and how they got more modern. But overall, you'll see a real flattening out of both damage and hit points. And that's really going to lend itself to good gameplay between the tiers.
Yeah, because the 1134, the premium tier 7, with the long pause between the rockets, for a lot of people it's almost being impossible to play. Because as soon as the pause after the first rocket, you have to wait a certain amount of time. And that time, you're simply getting killed or being shot at. You cannot simply fire your 2 rockets and come out of it unscathed. So a lot of people are quite upset about that because it's premium. So is that going to change or?
Yeah, I think you definitely expect that vehicle to become a pretty viable threat. It will model more the tank destroyer role of missile-based tank destroying power. One of the issues with it, obviously, is the current balance of APS systems. We haven't finalized exactly what we're doing with APS, but I would anticipate a general toning down of the efficacy of those the APS systems, likely longer cooldowns.
Would you say APS might move over to a manual system?
I wouldn't count on a manual system. We have talked about it a lot. We have actually written up designs for it. We don't know that what we need is more button presses in the normal core moment-to-moment gameplay. it may be a good direction to go with them, but I don't anticipate that being how they land with the initial Balance 2.0 delivery. I think it's more likely that we'll extend the cooldowns on them or reduce the charges or both as the initial delivery. And if we did introduce manual APSs, I think it would be a choice where the player can either choose to equip manual APS, and there would be some advantages such as very likely shorter cooldown in exchange for having to manually trigger it at the right time. But it is, or they could choose the passive one in exchange for longer cooldowns. But that probably won't be the initial delivery for it. One change coming that's worth noting actually with related to ATGM viability and APS as a manual tool is that the incoming ATGM warning is no longer a baseline ability for all the tanks. So ATs are going to be a little bit more scary with that because you're not going to get warned to jump behind the rock or roll behind the rock real quickly when you see the warning. That would also make manual APS very difficult in actual practice because you'd really have to be looking for that incoming rocket and hit it in time to do something about it.
Yeah.
So that side of the gameplay may not actually make sense when all this actually comes together. So we'll have to see if manual makes sense at that point.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. No, good. Thank you.
So, Headshot, talking, you guys got something?
Yeah, I was. You mentioned a lot about the rebalance of all the tanks and the armor and stuff. In the past, we've heard mention of a system where if you hit the same spot twice, it would effectively weaken that sort of area and make it easier to pen in the future. Is that still a system that you'd like to see implemented, or is that sort of fallen by the wayside a bit?
Yeah, it's a good question. The degrading armor mechanics or deteriorating armor. We had a lot of interest in it before we started really trying to shift the armor to its real-world values and also the ammunition penetration to the real-world values. As things are currently looking, as in our internal tests and things like that, we don't actually think it would necessarily be a healthy mechanic to add to the game. So at this point, I'd say it's on hold, pending further evaluation. As I mentioned before, MTs are going to be less invulnerable just simply by virtue of having more realistic armor and with the ammunition getting penetration that can counter that armor. So it feels like almost overkill at this point to actually have their armor degrade from taking repeated shots to the same location. They're going to have areas where you can make those shots against them. They have their hard armor areas, like the front of the turrets and things like that. And at this point, it actually doesn't feel like it would be healthy for MBT gameplay to make the turret armor degrade from taking damage. So we'll have to see. Right now, I would say it's on hold until we have a better sense of if it would actually be good for the MBT gameplay.
Talking, you had something?
Alrighty. Yeah, I was wondering about, as the NA server is a little lower populated than the EU server, because I play on it a lot, usually PvE, because I just can't get any PvP matches. And at one point, you guys did add the 5v5 matchmaking, and you guys took it away. Was there a reason for that, or?
Good question. Yeah, the 5v5 was an experiment. I think we only did it for an evening or maybe two at most. Just to see what it would do to the matchmaking times and what the reception would be. The primary problem with it when we did the experiment was platoons. When you got a platoon on one side and then no platoon on the other side, that really disrupted the 5v5 gameplay. So that was a negative. I think a lot of players did enjoy the faster queue times. That was our goal. I think it did succeed at that. But the platooning support, it wasn't like, because we just did it by changing the matchmaking settings. We didn't release any new code for it. So there was no additional support for that experiment other than just going and changing some numbers. We are working on better support for small team size for PvP as an actual full-fledged feature. To where, just as an idea, potentially smaller borders on the maps, closer spawn points, and specific matchmaking to deal with the platoon issue so that it actually becomes more of a viable solution to the game as well. Obviously, long-term, our goal is to get those numbers up on NA as well. We're hoping that some of the excitement for global operations and then also the improvements that we're trying to make to the overall core gameplay coming up with Balance 2.0 help start turning those numbers around so that the PvP queue can be healthy either way. But we are working on a small team mode just as a feature to have We could also use it for, say, Lords of War matches and things like that. So for us, there's several reasons we should develop this mode anyway. Even if it is not intended to be a permanent solution for what's going on with North America, it could help in the short term. That's not going to make the next update, but it is something that should come together pretty quickly.
Sweet, thank you. I really do appreciate that answer. There's a lot of positives in that, which is really nice.
Yeah,
and
it's
one more
something we
question.
spend a lot of time thinking about. Sorry, it is something we spend a lot of time thinking about. I mean, that's the server that's closest to us as well. So when we go to play, that's what we're jumping onto. We see the same few times, and we understand the pain.
Oh yeah.
And so that's literally was what we kind of just, hey, why don't we try 5v5s tonight and see how the queues feel? And we didn't. Like I said, it felt pretty good because you got into matches a lot faster. But at the same time, players were understandably upset when they got into a lopsided platoon situation. That is totally understandable. So we pulled it pretty quickly. We got the data that we were interested in, and it kind of justified us investing more time on it internally for a more full-fledged feature.
Oh, understood. Yep. I was like, I would like to join one of those matches if you guys still do those.
Keep it in mind.
Speaking of increasing the player base, is there a marketing plan officially in place, and can you give us details of when we should anticipate it to go live?
That's a good question. I can't actually go into it. It is obviously something that needs to be addressed, though. Hopefully some more news will come out of that in the near future.
All right, and there's in the game files previously, particularly during the closed beta, we found there were vehicles that are not implemented in the game, preferably a mobile mortar series of vehicles. Is that still a series of vehicles that you are exploring, or has that project been canceled?
It comes up every now and then as an idea. It's a tricky one. Indirect fire in general is a very treacherous ground in the type of gameplay that we're looking for here. And the SPM, or the self-propelled mortar carrier vehicles, might perpetuate that a little further. Just a little bit of background. Yeah, our vision for them was a vehicle that could switch between direct fire and indirect fire. So they'd be kind of a hybrid. Some of the challenges there is that typically those mortar vehicles were not really firing shells that would be viable against an NMBT or anything with real armor. They're kind of an HE spammer, and HE in general has not really been a very fun mechanic. So it's like, well, do we need more HE? Do we need more indirect fire? The answer to both of those is probably no. So that they keep coming up. We have a whole line spec'd out for them. Several of them were built. But at this point, I can't definitively say if they have a future in the game or not. It's something that we'll always keep in mind. We'd like to introduce some more classes with some new gameplay mechanics in the future. But the mortar carriers, every time we look at them, there's just a lot of challenges to making that fit and actually be fun for players and not just frustrating.
Rich, I got another question, and it's actually a plea from the Dutch people. Please give us a flag, because they keep complaining about it. Moldavia we have Albania, and no Dutch flag. So
I will bring that up internally right away. That should not be a hard problem to fix.
No, but
one of my viewer questions actually concerns decals, camouflages, and flags. Considering we are supposed to be futuristic mercenaries, will there ever be a system in which we can submit design work and art for tanks and decals, and that could be approved by, say, a moderator team or a team of people looking at them, and will those be available for public use if we so want them to be?
That's a really good question. I would love to do something like that. I can't see that it's anywhere in our near future plans. I'm a big fan of user-made content myself. I could see a path where maybe we do introduce it as maybe a contest and put the contest winners in the game before making it a full-fledged feature and pipeline. But I'd say right now it's a ways off. We do have some improvements, even just for the existing decal system, in the works. More flexibility in terms of scaling, rotation, positioning, and things like that we'd like to get out. I don't have a date on that, but it is something that's coming along. But as far as going all the way to user-submitted content, I'd say it's a long ways off right now, unfortunately. But it is something that I personally would love to see come to fruition at some point, because I think users can come up with some pretty awesome stuff.
All right. I have, well, 1.5 questions really. We'll go with the easy one. And it's a lot of people get annoyed when Armored Warfare introduces tanks from the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s, saying that this is 2030 and they shouldn't be around. Saying that Armored Warfare has a fixed timeline and stuff. What can you tell us about the decision to implement really old vehicles and stuff? And does the timeline of being in the 2030s matter?
Yeah, that's a fair question. Speaking from a purely narrative sense, does it make a lot of sense? Probably not. I mean, if there's these modern main battle tanks out there available, no one's going to be dredging up some vehicles from the 1960s to get into there and fight them. But at the same time, there's a lot of cool vehicles from that time period that we really were eager to introduce into the game. It serves a lot of purposes, more from a gameplay sense than necessarily a narrative immersion side, and that's to that sense of progression. You see the vehicles evolve from those 1950 era all the way up to the most modern vehicles. It gives a greater sense of variety across that progression. I think it would be challenging, to say the least, if we started with, say, the 1980s or even the 1990s era and then grew from there. So is there a really good narrative reason for it? No. We could spin one, but it's not easily defensible. I could put it that way. But from a gameplay side, it was really important for us to get some of those vehicles in there. Seeing like the original M60 and then being able to play like the M60A3, or going all the way back to the original Leopard and being able to get all the way up to the most modern version of the Leopard and see how that vehicle has evolved over time. I think things like that are really cool to do in a game, and that's why we went back further in the decades than necessarily a modern setting would actually imply. It's really for gameplay and a sense of progression and evolution that we did that.
All right. One that concerns quite a lot of people in that they've spent money and time and a lot of their investment into games like World of Tanks and War Thunder, and some of these people, they don't have that much income. And it can be very hard to get away from something when you spend so much time on it. And now we have Armored Warfare here. We now have 3 tank games. What makes Armored Warfare so different that people should consider playing it over, their garage is full of hundreds of vehicles and whatnot?
Yeah, that's a fair question. I mean, that's a discussion that we have internally a lot, because that's our responsibility, is to deliver something that's compelling to play in the genre where there already are established games. I can definitely say with the balance work that's coming together for Balance 2.0, the core gameplay is going to be quite different from what you're getting anywhere else in the genre. The missile gameplay, the smoke gameplay, things like ERA and APS and how they change up the battlefield, they're really going to change kind of the moment-to-moment gameplay in a way that you're not going to find elsewhere. I also think that the overall feeling of progression and the evening out of the tiers for the sake of having more fair gameplay between the tiers is going to be very appealing. And just the moment-to-moment gameplay is coming together very tightly. In the last few weeks, we've been doing a lot of Tier 1 through 3 play tests, because those are the tiers that we finalized first for Balance 2.0. And I can say that they've been a lot of fun. I think players are going to really see a reason to come try that out, take advantage of things like the smoke, ATGM systems, and things like that. I think also another big thing for players to check out is global operations. We're very proud of that mode. We think it gives players a unique experience in the genre that they're not going to find anywhere else. It maintains a very good sense of intensity and high action, but it still has the core strategies and strategic gameplay. that we feel are fundamental to the Armored Warfare experience. So really, when that comes out live and players can check that out, that's also something that when they see that, they'll understand, here's what we're trying to deliver, and this isn't the ending point. This is, a starting point of how we want to continue to evolve the game in its own direction with its own features and game modes. And, we've got a lot of stuff lined up like that for the future that we hope people are going to be eager to check out.
Thank you. This is something that we've all talked about, is that a lot of people view Armored Warfare as WOD of modern tanks, or just basically a clone, and that we all want Armored Warfare to not be part of the crowd and to be an individual.
Yeah, and that was part of the conversation that started the development of global operations as a feature. We sat down to take a look at what we had fundamentally. We thought, hey, we have these fun modern vehicles. They're fast. They're able to flex around the battlefield reactively, but we're not really taking advantage of that with our core gameplay mode. Why don't we develop something that really puts that speed and mobility to use? And I think that's what we've delivered with Desert Crossing. I don't know if any of you have had a chance to check it out yet, but I think that you'll find that it is operating experience that really stands very well on its own, and we're looking forward to getting that out to everyone.
Well, I played it, and I brought out a video about it.
I have played it extensively.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, actually. Really, it is.
It's definitely something that's different.
It is completely different.
And the ability to respawn as well. Like, you can make a mistake, but hey, you can respawn. I mean, it definitely gives people something to, let loose and try out those crazy tactics that you think about when you're drunk.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those interesting areas, because we really want to maintain that strategic gameplay where, your life and hit points matter, but maybe not quite as punitive as the one life approach that the standard PvP offers. I could see us, maybe developing a competitive mode for global operations where maybe, respawns are more restricted than they are in the normal mode. Down the line, that could be something we could experiment with. One of the things we're actually working on the topic of global operations is adding support to the custom game interface, along with some toggles that might allow users to test out things like, well, what if you limit the number of respawns to, say, 3? How does the match play out differently when they become more of a scarce resource? You still have the resupply points and things like that you can fall back to stay in a match after taking some damage, but it might kind of change up that sort of chaotic element of like, I'm just going to respawn, so I'm going to do something crazy, which I think is awesome for the normal matches. But maybe, for competitive gameplay, we may want to look at something that's a little bit more punishing for vehicle death, but actually still keeps you in the game participating. So there's a lot we want to continue evolving and deliver on the global ops front.
All right. Sorry, everyone, but like, all I can think of right now is just everything I hear from the forum, and this is going to be quite short, but what does CryEngine do for Armored Warfare and optimization? Because a lot of people want to hear about that.
So the question is, I'm sorry, could you rephrase it just one more time? I missed some of the words.
What does the CryEngine do for Armored Warfare? Like, why use the CryEngine, and how's the optimization going?
Yeah, good questions. So when we started on this, it'd be 4 years ago now internally, when we first started working on the concept. At the time, we looked at what options were available in terms of engines, and we knew we wanted to make detailed exteriors on large maps, and and we needed vehicle physics. And at the time that we started that kind of limited the field of options. I mean, CryEngine was actually pretty much the no-brainer pick at the time that we did that. So we started with it, ran with it, developed the game on it. And it has offered us a lot in terms of, it got us started with some initial physics. It had some vehicle systems that we were able to evolve off of. The environment artists were able to jump right in, start ramping up on making the maps and exterior props and things like that we see all over on our maps today. So it really served well on that front. Optimizations are something that we are continually working on pretty much constantly. Every update, we're working on new things for optimizations. It's one of those things where, unfortunately, just the nature of game optimizations is that we've kind of ironed out most of the obvious areas we were able to save performance on. So at this point, it's a lot of investment into smaller gains, or identifying something that's going to be a longer term endeavor, but will give us large gains. The number of items that are that can be done quickly and provide a large amount of optimization, we've kind of run the gamut on those and used those all up. But it is something that we continue to pursue with pretty much every milestone that we develop internally and turn into a patch update. Tentatively in .18, for the very low end hardware, there is a new low spec renderer that we have seen some pretty measurable performance gains on. Obviously, the visuals suffer pretty heavily on that renderer. It is targeting like our very, very min-spec computers and laptops, but those users should see some improvements with that new renderer. It is a brand new renderer for the low spec, so it is somewhat experimental at this point, and we'll continue to work on it and evolve it. But that's just one example of things that we're continuing to do. But we also want to make sure that we maintain a good high-level visual quality for players with the hardware that can handle it, and make sure that they're getting reasonable frame rates for what their computer should be able to pull off this day and age. And that's something that we also spend a lot of time auditing our maps for and our performance for. So always an ongoing effort. It's important to us too. We never stop talking about optimization and discussions about what our new features are going to do to the performance. That's always a conversation. Almost one of the first things we talk about is, what's this going to do to performance? And we then, as we develop it, we do continual audits on it to make sure that it's staying within performance budgets and things like that. We had to do a lot of that with Desert Crossing, because it's obviously introducing a lot of new elements. It's a bigger map than we've ever launched before, and so there were a lot of attention paid to the performance of Desert Crossing. But so far, the preliminary testing we're doing shows that it's performs about as well as our average performance map. So it's not the most optimized map in terms of frame rate, but it's also not our worst performing one. So one of those things we're going to continue to work on with every update.
Thank you.
I have something that's counterproductive to optimization, but I'll let Headshot and iTalkin or Freddy go first.
Yeah, I've got I've got a quick question. You're obviously very proud of Global Ops, and like rightly so, because it is a lot of fun to play. But at the same time, mentioned the low population on something like the NA server. So are you not worried that with the introduction of Global Ops as well as Lord of War at the same time, that it might be spreading the PvP population too thin and queue times could become a bit unreasonable? And have you got sort of plans to, like, backup plans in case that is a thing?
Yeah, very good question. A few thoughts on that. For .18, there is not intended to be any Lords of War for that patch cycle, so there won't be any competing demands during that window. With initial launch, we are looking at providing global operations as a separate queue, at least on the first few days that the patch is live, so that people can actually jump into the queue and check it out. Then, depending on queue viability and things like that, it's very likely, especially on North America, that it will rotate into the normal map rotation of the standard PvP queue. We do have a preference toggle that users can hit to indicate that they would like to get global ops maps more often, and the matchmaking will take that into consideration. It just can't guarantee them that they'll only get global ops maps, because we have to support all the players in the queue. So we are, trying to be proactive about accounting for that. Making sure that it doesn't compete with all the PvP players across multiple queues. I don't think that's a very successful plan for the North American audience, and we've kept that in mind. We're also working on, as I mentioned, Desert Crossing is our largest map. The second Global Ops map is even bigger, but the third Global Ops map is actually a smaller map. We're currently looking at converting Frontlines into a Global Ops map, which would make it the smallest of the 3 Global Ops maps that we would have by early next year. And the idea of that is that it would be a global map so that we could support smaller team sizes and still be just as engaging from end to end in the match. So that's something that we're always paying attention to and trying to figure out angles that we can address for the North America server. Again, as I mentioned, like our goals are obviously to grow that population and improve the health of it. But it's very hard to improve the health of the server if we don't put things in place that make it fun and engaging for the existing players and new players testing it out. So it's a very common conversation point on our side.
I know you guys just completed the first map for global operations. Is there any like new countries in the pipeline that are gonna have featured tanks?
New nation lines for vehicles.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. I probably can't go into it right now. I think I've been scolded for revealing things earlier than I'm supposed to before. So yeah, not for .19, but very likely the patch after that. We actually have a large inventory of vehicles that we've been working on that we then kind of set aside to work on Balance 2.0. As soon as Balance 2.0 lands, we will be sort of opening the floodgates. I would anticipate a high volume of new vehicle lines early into next year, but I can't give out any specifics right now.
Yeah, understood. I think one more question would be, Never mind. I'm good.
So,
Sorry.
in regards to my question, that would probably be counterproductive to optimization. Do you intend to add physics to the rest of the environment? Like, let's say a guy's using a building as cover. Well, I'm going to shoot through the building or shoot the corner out of the building so he can't use it for cover anymore. Or that house is in my way. I'm just going to drive through it.
Yeah. Not in the near term. We have had for a while on the books basically improvements to the environment physics, but it is kind of a ways off. Partially because, as you can imagine, the challenge that presents with optimizations. Unfortunately, if physics becomes more of a core gameplay thing in terms of the environment interaction, it needs to work the same on all hardware levels participating in the game, and so that kind of puts us in the catch-22 situation on our side that we're always trying to wrestle with. I'd love to get more of that in there. I think we can find some cheaper ways to get it in and still support it across all platforms, but it is more of a longer-term goal. In the near term, our focus on physics has been more on the vehicle movement level. How do wheeled vehicles handle turning? Some of the bouncing around that the smaller wheeled vehicles have demonstrated. We've been trying to clean that up. Ramming damage, falling damage, things like that have been a higher focus for our physics team at this time. But as we start resolving some of those, we'll start to look again into some of the other areas. I know one of the other things that we've kind of wanted to go back and revisit is it's more of a visual thing, but just the destructibility of the trees and how the trees get destroyed. What we have right now is very cheap in terms of performance impact, but we think we could look a lot cooler on higher end machines. So that's kind of an area where we'd really love to improve the destructibility of certain objects just for visuals on a high end machine, but maybe not necessarily affect the gameplay in the near future.
I want to ask you one question about the XM1A3. Can you tell us why the XM1A3 is being exchanged?
Good question. It may not even be exchanged. I'd say that's not a final 100% for sure change. It is a tentative change. The primary reason is our goal is to represent vehicles when possible with a real world vehicle. The XM1A3 was pretty much a speculative up-tiering and up-armoring of a vehicle that does exist, but not necessarily something that we could point to and go, well, that's what we built right there. We're looking at the Cat B as the replacement for that, something that actually was built, has the cannon that would make it appropriate for Tier 10. But the reason I say it's tentative is like we are working on it as a replacement, but at the end of the day, when we look at it and evaluate it, we need to make sure that the replacement vehicle looks awesome, has a unique profile, looks like an interesting vehicle to play, and still offers the same core gameplay experience that the XM1A3 does. Our goal isn't really to change the gameplay experience of it at all, so much as to get a vehicle in that slot that we can reference in terms of the real-world counterpart.
Oh, great. A lot of people love the XM183, so there were a lot of frowning going on, like why exchange it, and because it's a good vehicle. Yeah, but simply, I will ask. So, thank you for your answer.
Yeah,
Right,
it's a
so-
fair question, and depending on what we do, it could be a situation where, if we do end up replacing the model, it could be we dupe off that vehicle as a legacy vehicle. At this point, it's too early to say for sure that it necessarily is even going away. So we'll see what happens.
Okay.
So, final questions, real quick, guys. My final question is: we have heard tale of the French main battle tank line, such as the Leoric, I believe from you. Is there something you would like to tell us that's going to make the French main battle tanks different from, say, the German or the American or the British main battle tanks?
It's too early to say at this point. We are targeting those vehicles for next year, but because of the change in the vehicle schedule to accommodate Balance 2.0, they're a little bit further off than when I last talked about them. But yeah, suffice to say, we will find a unique role for them in Balance 2.0, so that they are a unique line.
All right, Spitfire. Last question.
Is there any plans to have any like themed missions? I'm sure a lot of people would like to have a PvE game where you're at the alternate history charge of like a Soviet tank brigade cracking through the defense of the Fulda Gap, or playing a chieftain during the Berlin crisis or something. Themed alternate history missions or whatever.
Yeah, awesome ideas. I can't say that there's anything coming out in the near future. We do want to expand the type of experiences available in the PvE side of the game, and I think that's a really cool direction to go. But right now, there's not necessarily anything in motion to deliver that. So it's been on the table with our discussions for kind of where does PvE evolve from here. But right now, it's not in motion.
Headshot.
Yeah, I mean, I'm more of a PvE player than I am a PvP one. How much of sort of global ops are you planning to put into the PvE game mode? Can you see things like the power up sort of working in there, that sort of thing, the new AI, or the bunkers, that for example, and is that going to factor into the new sort of the hardest difficulty, the extreme or survival, or whatever it's called?
Yeah, we definitely have plans for pulling in a lot of the mechanics that we developed for global operations into future PvE missions, and probably updates to old PvE missions as well. I would say things that have a high probability of making it in are the wild card mechanics. Calling in an airstrike, securing or placing down the missile launcher bunkers, or even having to fight against the ones that the AI is putting down. We already have kind of always had the concept of shifting primary objectives in PvE. That's been a fundamental part of it already, so that really isn't new from global operations. But certainly the wildcard mechanics, I could see us also potentially moving the resupply and repair mechanics from global operations into PvE missions, so that you actually have to have a fallback point rather than using the consumable. And things like that. I'd say that's a little bit further off, but I think there's interesting potential there as well. I think they'd make more interesting maps. So yes, we are definitely looking at integrating global operations tech into PvE. We developed it in a way so that it is interchangeable between the modes for us on our side.
And iTalkin, final question.
Yes. I know you guys just also completed global ops. Are you guys going to be implementing any more gameplay or game modes? Sorry, in the future.
More game modes. Yes. It's too early to really go into any of them right now. Global operations for us, to kind of put it in perspective, was about a 6-month effort, 6 or 7-month effort, really. So it's kind of one of those things where, like, we don't want to say something if we get a month into it and go like, you know what, this is a train wreck, cut this immediately. Which sometimes we've had to make that call. So I don't want to say anything. Yes, we do have plans for future modes, however. But I'd say, at least the next few updates. I think global operations is our primary focus in terms of the modes. We don't want to go too crazy with throwing too much in there all at once, and we really want to expand the variety of global ops experiences. We think there's still a lot of room to grow that feature before we start taking a look at additional modes.
Oh, totally understandable, and thank you.
All right, so we're wrapping it up now. We're almost at the 1 hour mark for this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed the extended episode. So we would I think all of us would like to personally thank Rich Taylor, project director for Armored Warfare, for joining us today. Rich, by the way, you're going to be on in front of, I think, close to 40,000 subscribers between all of us.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Appreciate it. Thanks a lot for hosting this. You know, I think it's something that we could even take a look at doing a little bit more regularly. You know, talking with our players, talking to you guys to get it out to players is something that is really important to me. Communicating to our player base. I've said it before on other videos and things like that, but really seeing feedback from our audience and seeing the energy that they put into not just, you know, making cool, awesome things, which they have done, but even if they write up, you know, a lengthy constructive criticism, that they put that effort into it. It actually does mean a lot to us here at Obsidian as developers, and it keeps us going in terms of thinking about, you know, what do we do to give these players who put this effort and awesome energy to our game an amazing experience. So thanks a lot for hosting me on this. I really appreciate the platform.
And if you or any of the other OE guys ever want to come onto the show, we would more than happily have you. But is there anything that our audience would like to ask? You guys have the comment section below. Let us have it, and we'll try to pass it along.
Sure.
Sorry we couldn't take all of your questions. There is only one Rich Taylor, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I know.
I'll do my best.
Definitely will pass along the questions if they are urgent or not. But I think it's good thing that you were on Armor Talk, and I want to thank you for that very much.
Well, thank you. It means a lot to me.
Yeah.
This is why we love Obsidian.
Yeah, exactly. Just you kept it, you kicked it right in. Yeah, that's what I wanted to say. Thanks a lot, Rich, for joining us.
You bet. Thanks very much to all of you.
Yeah, it's been awesome to talk to you.
Yeah,
It's been pretty
great.
cool.
So since I introduced you last, you wanna say the goodbye, Spitfire?
Oh god. Well, everyone, it's been wonderful, especially talking to Rich Taylor and iTalken finally coming back.
Yeah, no, right?
This is Headshot. Is this your first time?
It is, yes.
There you go. We've cracked Headshot's virginity. So this has been Armor Talk with me, Spitfire, iTalken, Headshot, Fury the Tank Girl, Digger Home, AK Lightfoot Freddy, and of course Richard Taylor. Thanks for watching. Leave comments in the videos below. Subscribe to all of us, preferably. And it's a goodbye from me.
See ya.
See ya.
See you later, guys.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.